Welcome to the second webinar in our series about grazier safety, presented in conjunction with OV Organic and Grazing BMP. I'm Ros Rees, the Senior Project Officer with the Agriculture Unit of Workplace Health and Safety Queensland, your facilitator for today. Thank you for joining us for today's session, which will take you through the second element of the safety management system, risk assessment. The first webinar on management commitment is now live on our website, and I'll provide that address at the end of today's session. Just a reminder that although these webinars are focusing on beef production, the principles of the safety management system and the templates we provide can be applied to any industry sector. Please send any questions through at any time during the webinar, and we will endeavour to answer them at the end. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey at the end of the webinar. It provides us with valuable feedback. Any problems accessing this link, please also let us know, and I'll give an email address out at the end of the webinar. We have a bit to get through today, so I will now hand you over to your presenter for today, Brenton Garlick, Senior Project Officer in Compliance and Business Engagement of Workplace Health and Safety. Thanks, Brenton.
Thanks, Ros, and again, welcome to everyone to our second seminar today. So firstly, just a quick recap on what we covered in the first session on management commitment, the first step in safety management systems. So we covered off that we need to make sure that everyone is aware of their safety responsibilities, allocate time and money to safety, make safety a priority, get managers involved in safety initiatives. Managers need to lead by example and also develop your safety policy. So to summarise all the information that we did give out, you just need to make safety everyone's responsibility. So everyone does have a duty under the Workplace Health and Safety Act. Get your workers involved and integrate safety into everything you do within your business. Only develop what you need and make sure you allocate resources such as time, people and money. Try to strive for continuous improvement and make sure you be persistent and don't give up. So as Ros said, the first webinar recording is now available for you to listen to, and the link will be provided to you after today's webinar. Okay, so like we said, today is the second of the webinars in our series about farm safety webinars. So we'll now go through the second step in developing a safety management system, and as you can see there is risk management. So firstly, we just need to clarify what is a hazard and what is a risk. So a hazard is something with the potential to cause injury, illness or damage to health. There are many hazards in agriculture. Some have the potential to cause more serious injury than others, and these are the ones that you really need to focus on first. So some typical hazards in the beef production are listed here on the screen, and they can include things such as riding a horse, riding a quad bike or motorbike, animal handling, mustering, working in the stockyards, animal and animal-related diseases, and also, importantly, sun exposure. So what is a risk? So the risk is the likelihood that death, injury or illness might result from the hazard. So for example, sharpening a tool with a bench grinder creates a hazard of flying metal particles. The injury risk associated with this process is whether the flying metal particles will miss the unshielded eye, enter the outer eye causing discomfort, or pierce the eye causing blindness. So another example would be riding a quad bike. This activity presents a number of risks such as rollover due to hitting unforeseen objects like rocks or holes, going up or down a slope that is too steep and also going too fast. So the risk management process involves the 4 steps set out in the Code of Practice, How to Manage Work Health and Safety Risks, Code of Practice 2011. Now a copy of this code can be found on our website, and the address will be provided to you at the end of the webinar. So the 4 steps, as you can see there on the screen, is step 1, identifying the hazard. Step 2 is assessing the risk. Step 3 is control the risk, and then step 4, review your control measures. So as you can see as well, in the small circle and the large circle around these 4 steps is management commitment and consultation. So with management commitment and consultation, this should encompass everything you do in your risk management process, as well as everything you do in the workplace. So I'll now go through each of these steps of the process. So the easiest way to look at risk management is to consider the three elements involved in a task, and that is the people, the environment, and the process. So firstly, the people. You need to look at things such as, are they trained? Are they competent? Do they understand what they have to do? Can they communicate with each other? And have you consulted with them? Looking at the process, consider things such as, what is the task? What plant is being used? Are the risks of using this plant being managed? And am I following the manufacturer's instructions or recommendations on the safe use of this plant? Are there established safe work procedures in place? And these need to be updated when new equipment is introduced. And also look at things such as guarding. Do you have guarding in place? When looking at the environment, you need to consider a whole range of factors such as, is it raining or extremely hot? Have I managed the risk of heat stress? Is the work area extremely dirty, greasy, or dusty? Are there other people or traffic around that need to be managed as well? Is the work environment close to a house? Are there water courses, electrical installations, or underground services that might affect the work you do? And also, are the yards in good working order with gates that operate properly? All of these questions and more need to be asked when assessing the risk. When it comes to managing the risk, you need to have a clear answer to these questions and knowledge of the most appropriate legislation or documents to help you to eliminate the risk and reduce it as far as reasonably practicable. So step one, identifying the hazard. So the way that you can identify the hazard is to look at things like inspecting the workplace. So go for a walk around, or when you are out on the property, look for potential hazards such as windmills, temporary fences, and also the conditions of your yards. You can also consult with your workers, if you have any, or even consult with family members about the tasks that they do. So find out if they have any concerns about aspects of the job. Do they have any suggestions for a better way to do a particular task? And do they feel confident in what they are doing? Make sure that you also review available information such as injury or near-miss reports, and talk to your neighbours and see how you are going in comparison with them. As mentioned earlier, there are quite a few common well-known hazards in beef production, such as riding a horse, riding a quad bike or motorbike, and also sun exposure. But there may also be specific hazards on your property, such as the terrain, anthills, washouts, as well as a myriad of other different hazards as well. So a hazard identification checklist has been provided for guidance in the process of identifying hazards, and it is fairly extensive to cover a range of industry sectors. It was a bit large to put on the slide, but hopefully you have been able to download a copy. But as we say throughout all of our webinars, we will also provide a copy of all our documents to you at the end of each webinar as well. So here's just a quick picture, just an example for you to look at, just to understand how to identify the hazards. So I'll just give you a second or two just to have a look here and see what the hazards are. So the three main hazards that we've identified here is number one, manual handling, number two, the posture of the person or the worker there, and also the handling of the livestock, so the unpredictable behaviour of the animals. So step two is then to assess the risk. So what is the likelihood of the harm occurring? So the likelihood that someone will be harmed can be estimated by considering the following information. How often are people exposed to the hazard? How long might people be exposed to the hazard? How effective are current controls in reducing the risk? Could any changes in your organisation increase the likelihood? Are hazards more likely to cause harm because of the working environment? Could the way people act and behave affect the likelihood of a hazard causing harm? And do the differences between individuals in the workplace make it more likely to harm to occur? So you can rate the likelihood as one of the following. You may rate it as certain to occur, so it is expected to occur in most circumstances. You could rate it as very likely, so will probably occur in most circumstances. It might be rated as possible, so this might occur occasionally. Or it could be unlikely, so this could happen at some time. Or you may rate that as rare, so this may happen only in exceptional circumstances. The level of risk will increase as the likelihood of harm and its severity increases. It is mandatory to complete and keep a copy for future reference of risk assessment forms for all the identified hazards that you have. So you can see here on the screen in front of you a copy of our risk assessment template. So a copy has been sent to you as well. If you haven't been able to download it, then this is what it looks like, and as we said, we will send you a copy as well. So as you can see, it's broken down into little pieces for you. Starting from the top, going to the bottom, we have the company details up the top. We have information about the hazard that was identified. We have answers to the risk assessment. We have the documentation of the control measures, and down the bottom, who this was implemented by, and also the review schedule, just to remind you when to go back and review your risk controls. So this picture you see here now is the risk register template. So this will help you keep track of risks you have identified and any follow-up work that is required. So keep it updated, especially for any new equipment or risks you have identified. And the risk assessment forms and the risk register will be valuable forms to demonstrate your commitment to workplace health and safety in case of any serious incident that may occur. So on to step 3, which is controlling the risk. So things to consider when deciding on control measures include the physical environment, so looking at the terrain, the weather, so is it hot, is it cold, wet surfaces and any overhead power lines, looking at the nature of the work, so the processes and the working conditions, looking at the required qualifications, so is training needed, does the person have any specific knowledge of the actual task they will be completing, as well as looking at the nature and severity of any potential injury or disease. So you will hear safety professionals talking about the hierarchy of controls for controlling your risks. The hierarchy of control sets out the highest to lowest levels of protection and the most reliable to least reliable control measures. So as you can see here by the illustration, elimination is the highest level of protection, and you need to think about, can the hazard be totally removed? We know that this is not always possible, especially with the operational tasks like mustering and working in the yards. So then we look at the next level, which is substitution, isolation, and then engineering. So having a look here, we're looking at level 2 substitution. So just in these two pictures, having a look at the difference between the both, what we've demonstrated here is instead of using a quad bike, you could maybe substitute this with a side-by-side or utility, or even a horse, making sure that you also choose the most appropriate tool for the job. So this example could also be both elimination as well as substitution because you've eliminated the quad bike altogether. An example in the beef industry for isolation is to look at the yard design to allow for workers to be separated from the cattle while working in the yards. So the yards that are designed to promote low stress handling techniques and utilise natural stock movement can provide for a quieter and more contented cattle, which also makes livestock handling safer. Other design principles for safety and ease of work for the people include self-latching gates, ready access and escape points, surfaces that reduce the risk of trips and falls, and isolation of workers from the cattle and from any animals. Building a new set of yards, of course, is not always possible, so look for simple solutions to improve the safety. An example we were shown by one producer was fitting poly pipe over the steel rails, which made it easier for the worker to roll through the rails if they needed to escape in a hurry. Simple, but apparently it was very effective. Another example, as you can see here, of isolation is shown here with a post-hole auger. So placing a guard over the auger to protect the operator from the moving parts. Now for engineering controls, erecting shade over the working race in the yards to reduce sun exposure would be considered engineering control. The previous example of the post-hole auger can also be constituted as engineering, as you have added something to the auger. At the bottom of the table is the administrative controls, which you may have seen previously on the hierarchy of controls. Administrative controls are the lowest level of protection. They include safe work procedures, training and induction, and also the personal protective equipment known as PPE. Remember that PPE is the lowest form of protection and should not be the only form of control. PPE can be used in conjunction with other controls and may be used in some situations as a temporary control until other controls are sorted out. So for example, the administrative controls for riding a quad bike would be a helmet should be worn and long pants and sturdy footwear. Only workers trained in correct riding techniques are allowed to ride them. Having a safe work procedure in place. They might also be speed limited and have no-go zones identified. Or a higher level control, as we have said before, would be to consider another vehicle. So step 4, review your control measures. A review of the control measures is very important to ensure it is appropriate, effective, and not exposing workers to other risks. In webinar 3, we will be looking more into developing the controls through the development of safe work procedures. This involves doing a task analysis and then looking at the risks and developing controls for those specific tasks. So be sure to tune in for that one to get more information on that. One thing that is quite important with your reviewing your control measures is once you've implemented a control measure, you need to make sure that you haven't inadvertently introduced another hazard or risk by mitigating against the first one. So consultation, this will be a recurring theme throughout all of our webinars, and it is very important. So consultation is required under legislation. As we discussed in the first webinar, talking to your workers can provide valuable information on how they are completing the tasks and any issues that they have actually identified. So consultation will make the workers more involved and more committed to the process because they have buy-in to the processes that are being developed. So on screen now we have the Hazard Management Checklist. The Hazard Management Checklist will provide you with some prompts to help with the process. You can add or delete relevant items to the checklist to make sure that it is relevant and suits your business. The template has also been provided, and if you haven't been able to download that, again, we will be able to send it out to you all by email at the end of the webinar. Now, that's it for today's information. So I'll hand you back over to Roz just to go through some extra information, and then we'll be calling for questions. Thanks, Roz.
Thanks, Brenton. So we do have some time for questions now, and while we wait for any of those to come in, you'll see up on what we have up on the screen now is our contact information. So that the website to download or have a look at the first webinar, or to get a copy of the templates and more information on the Serious About Farm Safety Guide is www.worksafe.qld.gov.au. And the info line is up there as well. It's 1300 362 128. And there's an email address up there as well, which will give you direct access to myself and the other members of the Agriculture Unit in Workplace Health and Safety. So if you have any specific questions for your business or you want specific information, please send an email into that agriculture@justice.qld.gov.au, and I'll get back to you with whatever information you would like. We also do offer to help you out with a site visit if you have systems in place or you're wondering whether what you're doing is correct, or you might want someone to come out and just have a bit of a walk around with you to help you out. You might be able to get a few people together in your area, and one of the inspectors could come out and just have a chat to people and just help you along the way with the risk assessment, because there is quite a bit involved in that. Just a reminder as well to take a few minutes to complete the survey at the end of the webinar to provide us with your feedback. We have 3 rural e-safes during the year, and you can subscribe to those on that website. So the website again is www.worksafe.qld.gov.au, and to find the information and the templates, just do a search. When you go on that website, look for the industry would be agriculture, and then you can search for Serious About Farm Safety, and it will take you to the site where you can download the templates and the Serious About Farm Safety Guide, which will just give you more information. And there's also on that website is some great films which you can use for training, and any other information that you might be looking for will be there. But as I said, if you can't find what you're looking for and you have a specific question for your particular business, please send me an email on that agriculture@justice.qld.gov.au email address.
Okay, Ros, we have a couple of questions coming through. So we may not be able to get to all of them, so some of them will be taken on notice. But the first one that has come through is, so talking to family and neighbours in the identification of hazards, how often should this be done? Should it be weekly, monthly, annually? And also, do we have any examples of businesses who have done this well?
Well, you should be identifying your hazards as an initial. If you haven't already done it, obviously walk around, do it initially and identify those hazards. Talk to your neighbours as often as you'd like to identify those hazards, and I guess working in together makes it easier to find solutions and controls for those hazards that you've identified. You need to set up a process once you've developed your risk assessments, as Brenton mentioned during the session, to review those. So depending on the task and how often things might change, you might want to do that 6 monthly or yearly. For most of them would be a good idea just to review them. And certainly if you're introducing new machinery or new processes, then you'll need to review your risk assessment process with that and make sure that all your workers are across the new machinery or have been trained and aware of anything new that's happening in the workplace. So probably at a minimum every 12 months, but it's very dependent on what it is that you're doing and how things change in your business and on your property.
Excellent. And following on from that one, we have how important is having documented safe operating procedures in place in terms of compliance?
Having the documented safe operating procedures is very important for compliance, especially if there's an incident. What they will look for is some evidence that you have made a commitment to manage your health and safety. So the best way to do that is to have documentation. So if you have documented safe operating procedures, it will demonstrate your compliance, but it also makes it easier for your workers if they have something they can look at. They don't need to be complicated documents. They could just be one page. They can have diagrams, pictures on them. They don't have to be reams and reams of paper. But by having those documented safe operating procedures as part of your safety management system, it will assist to demonstrate your compliance.
Excellent. Another one that has come through is, can you let us know if there is a specific section on the WorkSafe website where we can find all of this information?
Yes, on the WorkSafe website, as I said, if you go to the choose an industry, choose agriculture, and you can also search on, just do a search for Serious About Farm Safety, and it will take you to the Serious About Farm Safety Guide and the templates, which will be there to assist you, and all the other information that's provided. If you're looking for information on the codes of practice, then you just need to click on the legislation tab and then go down to the codes of practice.
Excellent. And we've got one here in relation to quad bikes. Do we have any information or review on rollover protection or cross protection devices for quad bikes?
There are a number of people who provide these devices for quad bikes. The Queensland Government does not mandate these. You'll notice that there's probably some information in the media that's saying that New South Wales, Victoria are providing some rebates for people to fit those. At this point in time, Queensland doesn't have that program in place, and you will, if you wish to fit a crush protection device to your quad bike, then you'll need to do a risk assessment on that and ensure that it meets engineering requirements for the machine.
Excellent. And we've just got another question here. How often, if at all, is an external audit required for the management systems? You don't really need to do an external audit. It's entirely up to you for your management systems. If you're happy with what you've done and you've been able to develop a policy, as we discussed under management commitment, and you go through all the steps that are outlined in the Serious About Farm Safety Guide,
and you're happy with that, then you don't need, it's not mandated that you have to have an external audit. You may wish to have somebody, you know, a workplace health and safety inspector if they're in the area at some time. You may wish to have a chat to them or get them to come out and have a visit just to go through things to check that what you're doing is okay. But it's certainly not mandated that you have to have it audited.
Excellent. And just while we're waiting, just in case there's some further questions, Ros, would you like to give any information about the new campaign that we have going, the Ride Ready campaign?
Sure. So on our website, you can do a search for Ride Ready, and there's some information on quad bike safety, which is a new campaign we have going. There's a new film out about the Coco family, and also some resources. So it just reinforces all those messages about wearing a helmet, have training before you ride a quad bike, selecting the right vehicle for the task and the right size of a quad bike to suit the age of the person. So there's lots of good information on that Ride Ready website, so good for training staff as well. So just do a search on our website for Ride Ready and that'll take you to that information.
Fantastic. Well, that looks like all the questions that have come through. But look, like Ros said, if you send any further questions to the email address that you have on the screen there, especially if it's specifically in relation to your own business, one of the agricultural people will certainly endeavour to get back to you as soon as they can.
Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us today, and keep an eye out for registration details for the next webinar, which will take us through doing a task analysis and developing safe work procedures. And as I said, if you have any questions, please send them through on the email. We look forward to speaking to you again in September. Thanks for joining us.